can be some really fun projects to try out. If so, all of these have been tested, all of these have been run, but if you run them and find things that don't work or you have other ideas, please always feel free to reach out to me after this talk. I love to share about these kind of ideas and stuff and breaking beyond what we expect out of AI. So that's basically the talk, right? We're going to go beyond the chatbot, beyond the IDE, so AI my CI/CD. So really break away from what we know where AI can be applied to and see if we can push the mold a little. So what is this talk not about? It is not going to be about end-to-end agents to automate the whole process of CI/CD. Um, I'm not a huge fan, if I can be candid, of when people are like, let's have one agent be the QA and let's have another agent be the developer and they can talk to each other and basically we have no more workforce. That's not my jam. I don't think that's how it's going to work out at all. So this is not what it's going to be about. However, it is about amplifying different parts of the pipelines that we don't necessarily talk about a lot. So let's look a little bit at the history of AI in for software engineering or for CI/CD in general. So, pragmatic engineer, pardon me, does this survey every year, and this year was probably my favorite survey just because it's now been a few years that AI tools have been in the space. So the most mentioned AI tools out of their surveys was GitHub Copilot, and so is ChatGPT. And then you can see all of the other responses. I'm sure there's a couple that you've seen maybe on LinkedIn or people that are very, pardon me the term, but tech bro might have told you about it, and you see those. There's some that are a little bit more also like very meant to be scaled, meant to be for the industry. If you look at, Copilot, you have both the Microsoft and the GitHub one. You have the Amazon Q, the JetBrains AI, stuff that's very industry based. But then you'll have some that are a little bit more meant to be for either side projects or more agile teams that don't have as many rules and requirements for security. So that would be your Devin, that might be, your Olama, it's kind of stuff where you can go a bit more crazy. So one thing that's very interested in my field, so I work in GoLogic, as Rocky mentioned, and we do a lot of mandates where we go and help out people. We do a lot of consultation, but we do a lot of also just like giving out advice and listening to what people are doing and making sure that people are always ahead of the curve. One thing that I find really interesting is the disparity from how Copilot is being represented either on social media or even on like more professional Slacks for either meetup groups or for on LinkedIn, on Reddit, whatever it is. GitHub Copilot doesn't get mentioned as much. Yet when you look at actual industry use, it is the most used AI tool, which I always thought was kind of interesting, the disparity between the two. And you can see, Cursor and Windsurf are going to be mentioned a lot, yet they're not that, used in the industry. One thing to notice also is that there's definitely some tools though that are getting traction that they hadn't before. I think a notable one that I think is definitely changing the scene is Claude. So with Claude Code coming in, they've changed how people use AI to code, basically almost letting go of the IDE and just going with vibes. And definitely different tools are gaining different traction. Gemini, Perplexity, about the same. Zed and Windsurf that basically were not existent before. And you have, GitHub Copilot that just because of it goes by percentage, and I think more people are using more tools. I don't think it's less popular. I don't think they've lost any customers, probably a couple, but nothing that would actually sway the stats. So same thing for ChatGPT, but just more people are using more tools, so therefore it looks like they're losing. I see there's already a question. Oops, where is the question? This is where you see I haven't used Zoom in a while.
The question is that because everyone uses GitHub and the Copilot licenses are purchased automatically?
I think that definitely makes a difference. Yeah. I think also it's a name brand, right? It's something that they were one of the first, and actually that's a perfect segue to my next slide here. So here's a completely incomplete history of AI for CI/CD. So, no, it's going to be on the later slide. But yeah, I think it's just because GitHub, it Copilot just was one of the first ones. And I think it takes a long time to get approved for these huge industries. When I talk about big industries, I'm talking like insurance companies, banks, like those types of people. It can take up to a year to get a new tool, even if you're GitHub, even if you're with Microsoft. It will take a while to get a new tool in the pipeline. So I think so much effort was done when it was one of the first tools, that now it's they're kind of with it and they're going to stuck it out a little bit more until they see. Honestly, GitHub Copilot is able to follow the hype and keeps growing every month or every 2 months with a new update that I can see them staying on top of things. So yeah. All right, so back to our incomplete history of AI for CI/CD. So CI/CD, for those who don't know, that's the complete life of software. So it's continuously building, continuously deploying code, software in general. So you'll have all these different phases where you first code, obviously, you need to actually produce something. When you build your code, when you test it, when you release it, deploy, operate, monitor, and then you go back to planning what you're going to be coding next. So that's why it has the nice little infinity symbol, right? Because that's how we keep it going. Um, so in this culture of DevOps, which is, for developers and operators, basically, there's been a lot of tools that have arrived throughout the last, 20, 30 years in the space. I'm sure you guys recognize probably a good chunk of these. What was really interesting is maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, as AI was starting to get a little bit better, you could see all these tools trying to integrate AI in a very minimal way, but they wanted the sparkles, that famous AI sparkles that people wants to just put on a product and say introducing, Kubernetes AI. That's going to be their thing. And all these tools had their own AI, and it didn't quite work out very well. I think a lot of people would get curious. They were already using the tool, and so they say, "Well, why not? Let's just go try it out." And then they would kind of not really work out of the box. And that's basically where we were about 5 years ago. Then came these models that were really good at generating code. So we had Tab 9, which is actually was founded in Canada, in Waterloo, in June 2018. So that was the first one. When you think of these kind of models back then, they were definitely smaller, therefore less powerful, less able to generate code of as much quality. But it was still, a breakthrough. Following that, you had Codex. Now, some people might recognize Codex as being a newer model from OpenAI, which I think for me is the most ironic thing ever. Because when I was first oriented my career and my studies in really machine learning for code, Codex was, the first model that was really fine-tuned on code. And it got dropped pretty quick, about a year after, when all the GPTs started getting a little bit better and they realized they don't need to have two models, one that's general and one that's for code. One general model is good enough. And then a couple months ago, they decide to reintroduce a model called Codex. So not the same for those who are, been following what OpenAI does. Just thought I would put that out there just in case people thought I got my dates wrong, because no, that is definitely the first Codex was in August 2021. So, Codex, which was actually the first model to be used for GitHub Copilot, so much so that there were so many papers that I read that would interchange between the name of GitHub Copilot and Codex, and there was almost no difference between them. And that's how like intertwined they were basically, and that was the beginning of the love story between OpenAI and Microsoft and GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot integrated the IDE in October 2021, and then you had ChatGPT. So all of these different moments in my eyes were kind of revolution in how people saw AI and how they could see it maybe become useful in their day to day. Before AI, you could maybe hear some stories about, oh, they can do medical imagery a little bit better. They can help tag pictures, but that was almost about it. When ChatGPT came out, that's when our mothers started telling us about ChatGPT. That's when they started being interested in AI. All our aunts and uncles, everyone that you wouldn't necessarily consider being techie, they really saw a use case in AI. And so did directors. So did people that were maybe more in a managerial position, not as technical. And they really wanted people to start using AI a bit more and see what could do. So I said it was incomplete because after ChatGPT, well, there was other tools that got inspired from everything that happened before. You had Cursor, you had Amazon Q, you have Claude, you have Codo, which was known as Codium before. So all these different tools that have emerged and really were able to help out in generating code faster. So we can see that this, all these tools now, they're here, they're all condensed in this little section of the CI/CD. They're all there to help you write code faster. That was their main thing, right? That was their bread and butter. That was their argument on why you should buy a license with them. Maybe you can see my next point, but that creates a bottleneck for the next phases. So if you're able to code faster, if you're doing a website, just a one-off website for maybe a friend's wedding, sure, that's great. There might not be as much as a bottleneck. But if you're generating code in an actual setting where all the other phases are just as important, there's going to be a bottleneck. You might produce more code, but you're still not going to be able to produce more results at the end. So why this change in focus? Why did we go from all these different tools in the CI/CD having their own AI to instead having AIs that are completely focused on generating code? Well, it all started with BERT. Now, I don't want anyone to tell me the revolution of the transformer came with OpenAI because it came with BERT. It was the first model to completely crush benchmarks and really see some utility in it, in how it was trained and how it could predict completely different. Obviously, the first transformer was also as much of a revolution, but BERT was definitely where you could see that this is actually going to be useful. It's not just a fun linguistic project anymore. So with um with this idea of BERT, they said, all right, let's take this model and let's fine tune it on a super precise task. And we're gonna, because it's a very precise task, we're gonna have limited examples. So that's when you would have all these tools that would try to add AI to whatever they had before. They would either have a little R&D team do that, or maybe they'd have consultants, or maybe they'd do a partnership and they would try to tag on AI to what they had, but training themselves the models on their own data set. That worked out just okay. There's some wins. There was definitely a lot of losses where it just ended up not being useful. So instead, this new generation of AI models or AI tools for coding or for software engineering in general, they realized, let's just use a hyper flexible model. These large language models that can basically do almost anything that don't need to be fine-tuned. And instead of fine-tuning it to the setting that we want, let's just give it the context it needs. And that works quite well. So in general, if there's one thing to remember is that in this day and age, context is more important than fine tuning. It's more powerful. Fine tuning is still useful and still needed in some cases, but when we're really looking at code in general, to have better results that comes out of the models, definitely stick with giving it better context. Because these different models, they've now become commodities. They've now reached a threshold of being good enough that the next step isn't about, giving them more training. It's about giving them the right tools or the right context. All right, I said a lot of terminology. I want to take a second to maybe look. Oh, and before I see that there's a question, Rocky, would you mind reading it to me again? I'm so sorry.
No problem. No problem. It's just a comment on the graph, just some feedback that because the time is not on the x-axis, it's a little confusing.
Oh, this one here.
Yep.
Yeah, so this that's a good point. So this one we're talking about the number of parameters. So that's basically as the models get bigger here. Yeah, we could have done it the other way. I think what the graph was really trying to show was that they get significantly bigger faster instead of being very linear. But absolutely, point taken. I didn't make the graph, so I I will relay the word to the other person who did. I will have to find my source even. All right, terminology check. All right, so I've said this, I think at least only once, LLM. So that's the large language model. This is what we refer to when we talk about an AI model that is made for text. Code is seen now as text. It used to be seen more as using the abstract syntax tree or even maybe the control flow graph. But now, really, the way models interact with code, it will interact with it as text. Training. So that's when you give the AI model some examples of what it should be able to generate. In the setting of text or code, this training will be done by giving, Bibles and Bibles and Bibles and Bibles of length of code and examples. So think, in a huge amount of text. Some of it is code, some of it is not code, and it's just so much text that no human could even read that in one lifetime, even if they didn't nap. Pre-training versus fine-tuning. So pre-training is when you have these foundational models. I talked about BERT, we talked about the GPTs. All these models are considered foundational models because they're basically AI models that have been pre-trained on just general a lot of things, just a lot of text. When we talk about fine tuning, that's when we get them really hyper specific on something. Either it is the setting or it's going to be the task. So there's two ways of doing fine tuning. Prompt engineering. I think more people might be familiar with that one. That is basically when you give a task to AI model, you will input text in the same way we do with ChatGPT, right? We say, hey, what's up? Give me a recipe for tuna. When you do prompt engineering is when you go through this iterative process, or there's some algorithms to help you do it a bit faster, where basically you will make sure your prompt is perfectly crafted or contains the right things so that you will have a better chance of having a result that you expect. GPT wrappers. So that, was very big about 2 years ago. We hear that term a little bit less. I still think it's a very creative name and I like it, where basically GPT wrappers are often a term given to when you'll have this company, often a startup. There was kind of a little bit of a boom with OpenAI and ChatGPT, where they'll basically create a product around a well-crafted prompt for a GPT. So this is where the idea of, all right, once you do prompt engineering well enough, you can actually create a new product. So this is where the GPT wrappers come from, where it's just around the model, you add more things and make it a viable thing. Context engineering, on the other hand, is similar to prompt engineering, where you're actually doing some little fine-tuning, or fine-tuning not in the sense of the pre-training versus fine-tuning, but fine-tuning in the sense of crafting ways to make sure that you're sending the right information at the right time to the model, basically. So you want to make sure that when the model has to do a certain task, it is given all the information that it needs. If I ask, someone that hasn't studied law to read me about a certain case, I better give them that case. Otherwise, they won't be able to answer. So it's a little bit the same thing here. You want to make sure you're able to give the right example, or sorry, the right context to answer the question correctly. Similarly, if I ask someone to generate code from a third-party library, but that library is actually closed source and no one has ever seen it, it's going to be quite hard. And then there's MCP. So that's Model Context Protocol. So that is a way for the models to talk to each others. And for the models to talk to tools, to other things that they might want to interact with. So let's focus on MCP here. So why even invent MCP? Why did we need to have a protocol for AI to talk to tools? Why is that something that actually is important? Well, it's a way to aggregate data from multiple sources and keeping the complexity kind of, on the lower end. So it lets the model interact with different tools and systems. So It can be either tools in your CI/CD, or it could be just your email inbox. It could be even your file system. That is the kind of tools that a model can, once they have access to it, can actually start doing actions. So before we had a very passive interaction with the model, right? We could only talk with them. It was just a back and forth in text. Now the models with MCP are able to interact with tools more easily. You can kind of just plug and play. So what is exactly MCP? What is this new protocol? Why does it work? Well, you have to kind of see it as a REST API in web dev. This is a gross over generalization, but for the scope of this talk, I think this is going to be enough to understand how exactly or what exactly it does. So in general, if you want a little bit more of a definition, then it's going to be a protocol for structured transmission of precise instructions. So this is what will help a model define an actual operation it wants to do. So this need for MCP kind of came with the number of tools that were growing, and the integration complexity did as well. You could, hard code what exactly the model needs to do or say when it wants to use a tool, but you don't want to have to do that each time you have a new tool or when you have an API that change. You want something that kind of can grow with the model, and the model doesn't need to always be changed when your tool changes. So that's basically the idea. So MCP architecture, there's going to be the clients and there's going to be the servers. So the clients, you can look at those as your Copilot, your cursor, your Claude, or it could be even just an LLM that you have running up. For the actual MCP server, which is what we tend to hear more about on LinkedIn, Reddit, all the blogs, that's going to be the tool. So how do the tool, the server, and the client actually talk? It's going to be through a transport layer. So there's a couple different options. There's SDIO, SSC, Streamable HTTP, but again, outside the scope for today. So I talked about the different types of clients. There's our GitHub Copilot, or you can even have an open source. So this is a LibreChat, LibreChat, maybe with a good English accent. So LIBRE chat, which is an open source chat GPT interface type where you can connect your MCP. Anyways, we use it at work for our own internal system. This is basically what we use to connect to a bunch of our MCPs internally. And I definitely recommend even for just home projects for people that want to have their own chat GPT. And there's also a large choice of MCP servers. I won't go too much into detail because it's going to be a good chunk of the talk. We're going to go over some examples. But really, the sky's the limit. If you're able to very clearly define what an operation is, you are able to build an MCP server for it. So it could be Grafana, it could be Confluence, it could be with your database or with Kubernetes. Really, the sky is the limit. All right, back to our CI/CD. I think this would be a good point to stop just to make sure there's not any questions. Also, feel free to speak up since apparently I need to rely on Rocky for the written questions. All right. So I'm going to go through,
Wait, hold on.
oh yeah.
So you had a slide earlier with sort of the bottleneck, and yeah, that one. Do you consider though then like test and monitoring and CI and all that stuff not code?
it- you're like about 20 slides ahead, but I love it. That's very astute. Absolutely. I mean, infra is code now. It's hard to kind of see all of these different and they definitely overlap. And I think they can help, there's some MCP that we tried internally at GoLogic for OpenTofu, for Terraform that have been quite nice and they help you write your little Terraform files faster
Yeah.
and with better quality. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So very astute point. Awesome. All right, so we're going to go through the different phases here. Um, so we talked a lot about code. as the one of the phases that are covered by AI, and as the name of the talk says, I kind of want to go beyond that. So let's go look at maybe building. So what would you want AI to be able to do for you in your build phase? You would want to maybe reduce build time. That would be awesome. But also you'd like to probably reduce build failures. So there's different ways to be able to do that. The kind of more straightforward one is to go fix a bug that's preventing a successful build. But there might also be identifying common causes for builds. So let's go look at those two examples. I said this one was the simpler one. I did a very simple example here on my GitHub Copilot this morning where you are able to have your Copilot look at your build output. So here I just run the Python file because it's basically equivalent. It's just running a terminal um, command. Oh my God, I'm speaking in French with the French intonation so much tonight. It's crazy. So command. So basically your Copilot can, see the output of that on that terminal and see the output. So you can do the same thing for a build. If you do a Maven build, if you do a Gradle build, you're going to be able to see the output and it can basically have this sort of loop where it can basically just learn from what the build error was and then continue with its changes if you put it on sort of an agent mode or something where it can keep iterating basically. Even if for some reason the way you're set up, you're not able to have this integration where your AI model or your coding assistant can't read the output of your build, you can always have it maybe just run the command on the terminal and pipe the output to a file. There's ways to duct tape this. I'm a big fan of duct tape engineering, and this is exact example of that where there's no need to overcomplicate how the AI is going to be integrated with the terminal and how you're going to pipe it and everything. Sometimes it's just as simple as putting in output.txt and just each time you run, it overrides so you don't get a huge output and letting the AI read this as it's trying to do more code. So that's one way around it. The idea here is that you change your code, you try to build. If it fails, you add that build failure log to your context, and then you try again, and then until you succeed and profit. I had the other in another scenario here. This is work I did in my old company at Modern, where for those who don't know, Modern they do code refactoring automatically, and they do a really nice mix of deterministic and non-deterministic. One of the things they have to do, Modern, before they can refactor code or modernize the code automatically, is that they have to parse and build projects. So the idea of Modern is that they do multi-repo refactoring. So they have, it can be hundreds or it can be even thousands of repos that need to build for one customer. And they need this build because they need to parse the code and actually go get the compile time information out of it. And one of the key first integration problems we would have with clients is that every customer is different, right? And you can try to dog feed as much, but you're gonna get some weird wacko setups, some configs we never thought we would see in Gradle, and we had to basically find common causes of why things were failing. So this is one of the things we did here, where we ended up getting a numerical visualization just a visualization of the failures of the logs from the builds to be able to identify common causes. So in the background, the way this worked is that we gathered all the build logs. We would extract the relevant snippets. We would send that to an embedding model, which an embedding model or an embedding is just a numerical representation. So really see it as an array of floats. That's all that's important for now. And with this numerical representation, you're able to cluster and have these groups, find the kind of the groups of where each of these dots belong. So every single dot that you see here is going to be a build log. We're able to see it in 2D because we do also a dimension reductionality. So if we go back to the actual output here. This is why we have X and Y, which they don't mean anything. They're just representations. It's just fancy algorithms to make it look in 2D. Um, what's really important is the color or the group number, as you can see on the right on the legend that it was associated to. So what was great about this is that we were able to quickly find, sorry, common causes on why the builds wouldn't work. So maybe it was a path missing, maybe it was a config, maybe you were missing a token to connect to some artifactory, whatever it was, we were able to quickly basically fix all the main big problems, and then we would have more time to focus on the little ones. And that was really great because, when you're integrating a client, Modern is it's a product that people want, but because with this integration issue, just because it's such a complex problem, it can be kind of scary when you're like, oh, you only have, 80% of my repos. What about the last 20%? So if we're able to get to that 99 really quick, and then those little kooky repos for that last 1%, we'll get to them. But let's focus on getting the big number out. Everyone's happy. Awesome. Let's get started on the real work kind of thing. So that was for building. So let's go now to testing. And yeah, like Llewellyn said, testing definitely also a type of coding, right? Why would you want AI in there? Well, you could get more test coverage. So that would be, you could write more unit tests. Um, you could also help a QA, now an actual person, automate their assessment process. Or you could even add AI checks when a PR builds. So if we look at this setup here, this was a fun project I got to do with a customer where basically they had a very limited amount of QA, but they still had a very strict policy about having everything go through QAs. They would only deploy code every 2 weeks. And so it was very, very demanding for the QAs. So they never really had time to kind of have an automated process. They had a couple scripts with robot framework and all that, but most of the time they had to just go try it out themselves. They would literally go open the website, go click on the buttons, make sure the videos still load. Same thing for the phone app. They would plug their phone, go check manually. Had a couple scripts, but it was very, very limited. So one of the first things we did was let's have those scripts that are already being written by the actual QA. Let's have also your coding assistant have access to the HTML of the website and the screenshot of the page. So getting the screenshot of the page was done through the Playwright MCP, which is a tool that already exists, right, for QAs and for testing. So with this process here, we're able to give the right context faster. So instead of having to iterate with that particular QA was using GitHub Copilot and was talking, saying, okay, I want you to add an insertion that when I click on the video is marked as playing. So that was a very like long process. If he was able to just send, the screenshots here, the idea is not that the screenshot and the Playwright MCP are the QA process. They're just helping you write the actual tests faster and those scripts that go make sure everything is running the way it's supposed to. So that was a really fun project we had to do with a client. Another thing you could do is when you have a PR and you want to send it to maybe an MCP client or really an LLM at this point, it's not so important. You might want to check, well, let me go see if some APIs might have changed. And if they have, you can either use your Postman or Bruno, however your collections are set up, to go get those and run those tests. And then bring that back to the MCP client or the LLM and have them maybe mark the PR with a comment, say, well, this API, it seems like it's not working anymore. Maybe it's the test that's broken. Maybe it's the API that shouldn't have changed. Regardless, all that's important here really to remember, we're not automating from A to Z. We're just helping the information flow in between the phases much faster. And this is another example of it. So we were in test, and now we're going to skip a couple phases and go down to monitor. So you think you guys are starting to maybe see a little bit of a pattern here, right? The idea is to give more context to your LLM, and often MCP is going to be a quite useful way of doing that. Here, you might want to have some sort of MCP wrapper around your Grafana and your Datadog. They both have MCPs, but maybe you want to control what gets sent when. You don't want to just send, a whole dashboard of Grafana filled with logs because then the information would get lost. So you could have your own MCP wrapper in there where you can look for keywords. Really, again, the sky's the limit. You get to play with these Lego blocks. You get to build what you want and send the information in a way that makes sense to your client. So if you know you only use Grafana for a certain setting and you only use Datadog for another, this would be maybe an instance where you would have this MCP wrapper around the two and get to pick and choose what you're going to use, basically. So we were in monitor. Now let's go to planning. So that is probably our most fringe project, if I may say, that we did. This was a POC that we did with a client where they had about 5,000 VMs with VMware on-prem. Pricey, pricey, pricey. So they wanted to migrate to the cloud and potentially Kubernetes as well, when possible, to get rid of those VMware licenses. So we kind of had to build this agent, and that's probably the most integrated agent we've had to do so far, where that agent would go get a list of VMs. It would also take in a list of inventory. And the idea was for it to give a report with a list of expected prices for the migration for each VM. So when I say the list of VMs, you can see I have a couple examples there. This is synthetic data for the sake of this talk, but where you could have, your legacy billing VM or your radius auth VM here, and you have basically the specs of that VM. Then on your list of inventory, this is when you have the actual software that was running there. So in this one, you see we have a .NET, we have a SQL, we have a free radius. And you can see this was definitely very legacy code that we had, or legacy frameworks that they had. So once we had, this list of VMs and this list of inventory, we wanted the model to go iterate one by one on these and look at what would be the equivalent minimum specs if you were to switch to Kubernetes. Do you still need as much compute? Does it make no sense to go with Kubernetes? Maybe you have a database that you would want to merge, then sorry, migrate, then you wouldn't want to go to Kubernetes. So you wanted to give it access basically to searching on the internet. So that was the first thing. You wanted to be able to Google, all right, well, my free radius. Maybe somewhere it's going to say in the documentation on their website, if it's still up, because it's, some of these things were definitely legacy. Go look at what was the minimum specs. Once you have that, go look on the AWS calculator. So that was integrated as well as a tool to go look at what that cost would be. From there, very simple calculations, and go put that in the report. It's very possible that some of the software didn't find any documentation on the internet. So it wasn't a complete process. It was definitely a human in the loop kind of thing. The idea was just at least to have some information out there already done. And even if it was able to find conflicting information, it had it on multiple lines so that the human could go verify. Obviously, always with the link of the source so that you know that the AI is not just hallucinating. So that's where we are right now, the project. There's definitely been a couple of winning VMs that we see would be really worth it to switch over. Some that we say no, it's not worth it for now. Let's keep them on-prem for a little bit. But the way this AI now is able to interact with a couple different systems and a couple different tools was enabled it to become a little bit more of a planner and really amplify this, it's a big business decision to decide if you're going to take something on-prem and put it on cloud. So whatever you can do to really amplify that human's job, that is to do that analysis, the better it is. So it's a little bit more different than the other ones that the other examples I gave you, but just to give an idea of how to push it even forward a little bit more. I will give you that this, is more of an integration. This isn't as easy as just plugging an MCP to your Copilot, absolutely. But just again, I wanted to make everyone dream a little. Rocky, I saw the little question go in and I can't catch the button in time.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Someone was just observing that you did skip past the release, deploy, operate, and monitor steps. And I think they might have missed the part where you said you were skipping over them.
Yes, I am skipping over them. I do see that there's some utility in them, but I think the framework of plugging your MCP that has access to that information and then putting it to your Copilot, whatever your MCP client is, at some point it would have been a little bit redundant. So I did decide to skip over them. The operate, though, we will see soon again, as Llewellyn pointed out, is basically code now, right? Uh, was that just another message related to that, or yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
awesome.
Just a little acknowledgement and thanks for clarifying.
Of course. No, very astute listeners. I'm appreciative. So we were in the planning phase. Let's go into the coding phase. So this here is probably if tomorrow you have to help out your setup and your coding assistant. These would be your easiest wins, definitely. And this is where you can, plug in your Grafana, you can plug in your Confluence, you can plug in your Jira, you can plug in your GitHub. What I mean by plugging your GitHub is that you might have some documentation in there that might be useful. You might have some golden workflows. So here's the Terraform part I was talking about. So if you have, these examples that you want to share with people, in the same way, you might want to share them with your coding assistant, right? So whether it's Grafana to be able to go get, a stack trace of a log or go see some number that might be important in that moment, your Confluence to go look at documentation, your Jira to go see if actually this ticket can be closed, all those, they're just a way of really supercharging your GitHub Copilot or your Cursor, your Claude, really whatever it is you use. And you know, you have these other phases that are being covered in that too. And absolutely, there's some overlap in between. And once you give access to a tool, a hammer can put in a nail, it can also remove it, right? Um, you can make tea in a kettle, or you can, well, I guess you can only make hot water in a kettle. That's a really bad example. You can boil water in a pot and you can boil milk in a pot. So this is what I mean, is you have your different tools that can be used for different settings here. And once you have the integration already plugged in, then you can really have fun. And you'll see as you plug in more, you kind of are going to get these aha moments that I wouldn't be able to predict because I don't know what technologies you're working with. So it's really your responsibility now that you might have a couple examples to go and plug in those tools to your MCP clients and see how maybe you can push the boundaries a bit further. So, takeaways. We have all these little blocks, right? We have all these tools that we're familiar with. We have some we love, we have some we hate. Regardless, they're there. Sometimes we're forced to use them, and they all have their different job. Some are going to be used on different phases of the CI/CD, and you also now have a new shiny block, which is your models, your AI models. Those, because they're now very general, they're general models. They're not back to what it was 5, 6 years ago, where it's a fine-tuned model. You have this now block that will fit a lot of things. It's almost like the glue in between those blocks that can't interact with each other. You can now have your Grafana talk to your Jira as long as you have a model in the middle. And that's thanks to the MCP. It's kind of like if you have a translator and this translation is text and it's so simple and it's like, yeah, duh, we should have thought about this. But the idea is here is can have a model that can fit any setting, basically. So now you can make nice little fun toys and it's yours to go discover. So I did say I was going to crush everyone's dream. I think I over exaggerated. I just want to put out some words of wisdom. This, is meant to be the first talk, so very high level, very, to get you guys excited for what's to come and what people are going to say. They're definitely going to dive more into the subjects. Um, just want to, set the scene, make everyone feel excited. Maybe try out some things this week or this weekend, and then be able to ask the some maybe more pointy questions as the next talks go on. So, anyways, but I did want to still give some important information here. So, if your setup fails, whatever your little Lego block that you've built, your little Lego toy, if it fails at the first try, try giving it more context. So, a lot of the times when we'll go do some training on how to use AI for software engineers, we'll see that very quickly someone can become a septic because they didn't quite configure their tool the right way. So that includes giving it the right context. For Copilot, for example, that's just a tool that we end up giving a lot of training in. People forget to give the files as context. And so this is the same thing for the MCPs or for your documentation. Say you want to give that as context, make sure you're giving it in the right way. And it's more often going to be a problem of the context than it is of the model. Sometimes a bit your prompt, but if you've done a little bit of prompt engineering throughout the last few years, that then it's going to be the context, most likely the issue at first. The message I want to definitely also put out, MCPs are cool. They definitely let you, iterate on projects much faster, but let's not undermine years of battle-tested security strategies. This is not the time to start, sharing your PATs with people. It's not the time to start, putting ports open on your Docker. Let's just remember the right principles. Let's try to be sound about it. If you're unsure what you can do in your company, definitely go, ask around. Um, if you're willing to just try it out on your PC and take a risk, go for it. And we kind of love stories when it fails too. Those are funny to laugh about. So, um, for the MCPs, I kind of gave a lot of examples here of different integrations of tools. I just wanted also to let people know that there's such a thing as too much tools. The models, they can have really, really big context and they can take in a lot of information at once. There is though, like as you bring in more context, as you bring in more information, there will be less good quality output. That's just because in the same way that if I, give you a huge book and ask you about one page, it's going to take you a while to find that page. It's a bit similar in that sense. There's just a lot more noise. Um, us humans, when we read text, we're able to, just focus on the actual sentence and not read every word. Models can't. They're always looking at every word in the text that you give them. They'll just give a lot more attention to the point of almost forgetting everything else, but they still have a little bit of attention or a little bit of focus on the other words inside the context. So just make sure you try to be, kind of diligent about this. You can definitely plug in, multiple MCPs, but maybe it might be worth it to only have a couple tools per MCP that is enabled. I definitely wouldn't go over maybe 40. Even 40 can seems like a lot to me. If you really craft it well, you can go up to even 100, 120. But if you know exactly what you want to do, stick it to smaller number of tools and iterate from there and add on little by little. For people who wanted alternatives, I talked a lot about MCP clients. I just wanted to give two alternatives as well. There's N8N for low code. So if you wanted to do, small demos, small little things, automate some processes, send a funny different message when you're on vacation, that would be something you could do with N8N. And it's really easy to set up, really easy to use as well. and it's quite fun. It's a good product for that. And then there's a LangChain and LangGraph. So if you want a little bit more flexibility on actual building those models and how they interact, then I would recommend that framework. So you have it in Python, but there's also forks in other languages, and really you can have your fun in whatever language you're more comfortable with.
Justine, can I ask a question?
Absolutely. It's
Back on
actually
that previous
Mhm.
slide there. Yeah, good timing, right? Um, so you're talking about alternatives, this N8N for low code and LangChain LangGraph for high code. So it's just a little unclear to me what those would be alternatives to and what kind of tool and what value they bring.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So when I mean an alternative because I talked a lot about, Cloud Code, Cursor. I talked about also GitHub Copilot. So these are kind of like the clients that are already interacting with the tools. Those are kind of like where your AI is being used. Here would be if you don't want to have a chat interface, if you don't want to have it integrated in your IDE, then you can have an N8N. So if you wanted to, always send a response, I'll give the example of the email again, but maybe with more details. If you wanted, between this date and this date when you're on vacation, whenever you get an email, you want to respond with a funny little message or maybe with a vacation pun, and you want it to be, randomized from a data set that you have already pre-written because you're very particular about your jokes. Say that's your problem that you want to do. You don't need to have a copilot for that. You don't need to have a Claude Code. I think OpenAI has now something where you can run something regularly, but you kind of want to have a hook, right? You want to almost build this new AI agent. This is where N8N would be great for because it'll integrate into your email really quickly. And it's just nodes that you can connect and have conditionals between the nodes. And that's what I mean by low code because you could get around with basically not coding and just putting in configurations. So this would have, your input would be when you have a hook, when you have an email come in, go see the database, randomly pick a message with the pun, and then send that message as a response to that person. So that would be a very simple, 2, 3 nodes and where but then you could add even more like logic to that. You One of the things you could do is when you get a new ticket assigned to you on Jira, go check that it doesn't exist already you know that could be something you don't want to basically have to be. You're not the hook anymore. You're not the thing that provokes this action. This is when 8N would be good for that. LangChain, same thing, but you actually have to code it. And so you can have more flexibility in it. You can really integrate in anything you want, but same thing. So this, if you want like a product, if you want to have a chat bot inside your own website, you would probably do that with LangChain or with N8N. So this is what I mean by alternatives. So they can still be used later to develop things within your ecosystem, but they just won't have the same interface.
I see. And would these be examples of models that you would host internally then, or?
You can plug whatever you want. It can be internal models, it can be Azure OpenAI, it can be OpenAI, it can be Anthropic. Really, at this point, the node is just, connecting to those models. The way those models get, messages and respond, it's all standardized now as well. So the way the setup is done, we don't need to care as much about how to send the message to the actual AI itself. That provider of the AI will take care of it. Or it can be running locally. So if you want to run something locally with Olama, then you could.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, so this sorry, we went directly into the questions. Were there any other questions? I wanted to leave a lot of time just to talk and chat. this, as I said multiple times now, I kept it very high level. So the idea is that we have a lot of time now to really dig into things if needed.
So you had some examples before,
Mhm.
um, and I was just wondering, like, because it was so high level, I felt like I was kind of just skimming along the surface. I can we go back to one of those examples there?
Is there one in particular?
Um, I'm gonna need you to refresh my memory by going back a little bit.
No, for sure.
That's okay. Thanks.
So this is the coding one. This was the planning with the migration.
Yeah, okay. So I guess like what I'm wondering is like you were talking about um some of the some of the tools that you used and generally about the fact that they helped you.
Mhm.
Um, Now, can you compare like your workflow in like implementing this as like how did that differ from how the workflow would be if you didn't use that tool? Like what advantages did you gain by doing this?
It's really like you had an intern that went to go look at a bunch of documentation to find the minimum specs. That was really the time gained here. Um, Instead of having to go look at, a bunch of blogs that you might finally find the right link with the right documentation about that exact software and the minimum requirements that it needs. That was basically the idea here. So it's an iterative research agent basically that can read a lot of text, give you a summary later with the sources always. And then you have that basically put inside a very simple CSV that we did. Um, this is compared to having basically someone having to do that research. So the person might still have to go read the documentation. Like I said, it's a very big business decision to migrate from on-prem to cloud. And it's definitely not just going to be done because an AI tells you, oh, this will be worth it and this is going to cost you that much, right? But the idea is just to at least have the human put in context a little bit faster. So we don't have the exact numbers of how much time it was saved. I want to say like maybe a good 30 minutes per type of migration. So
Okay.
per software.
So you mentioned like it's coming back with answers to the questions and sources for those answers. And one thing, like from my own experience and also notoriously online, um, like what was your experience with it coming back with those sources? Because like it's like hallucinating sources of information is like I think probably one of the most common things that I've heard of.
Yeah. That's why you have to have the source with it. So basically, the AI, once it would say, okay, this page has information that's useful, it would mark it as a source, and then that would be added to the CSV. The hallucinations it did more was like having the wrong version of the software, so it would get you the documentation for the wrong version. But that ended up being still very useful because you could normally find the other version if it was still up on the same website. So that was probably the most hallucination it did. We also made it very it was very encouraged not to put anything if it wasn't sure that this was the same software.
And did you do that through the prompt engineering?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There would be ways to add more guardrails. I'm in the camp of you start simple and then you add more layers, and it's the same thing for AI. If you have, the way to do it with prompt engineering, it might not be something you trust as much, and it might not always work, but adding like a classifier with confidence and all that, that's something that should be kept for like later things. Because also this is not something that happens often, this huge migration, there's also not as much of a need, right, to develop a whole extra layer of AI that does classification. So yeah, so it was prompt engineering to answer more directly.
Thanks, Justine.
Yeah, of course. I can
Do
go
we have
through
more
another
questions?
example. I'll go back during that time. This one, this one. That's another fun one also that I'm doing with another client of ours where they are using Bruno for their collections for APIs. We haven't done it yet, but so they're using Bruno for their collection of APIs. That company got bought and now they have to use Postman. So we're gonna have to migrate those collections to Postman. So that's gonna be a fun little project we're gonna do soon.
Oh, great. I mean, that sounds like something that would be just about ideal, right? Like you've got good examples on both ends, I presume. And so you can just say like, hey, I want it, I want you to take this data and form it like this data, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was this one. The playwright one is quite cool. It can also click for those. This wasn't as useful for this setup here, but the playwright MCP is if there's one MCP you just want to play with, I'd say it's the one that's kind of really fast to do and useful.
With that one, how did you deal with cost of actually calling the AI? Because I have a facilitator that started working on something like that, where he basically thought of uh, trying to automate your testing by using AI to try and say, like, this is a login page. Now, this is also a login page, and in a way that it can then go and automatically recognize, hey, yes, this is a login page. So you can make changes to the color or something else, and the screenshots don't necessarily need to be updated because there isn't one. It's just smart enough to realize it. But at the same time, he also found a bit of an issue where when you give it all of the context of the HTML, that consumes a lot of tokens and makes the AI requests really expensive. How did you necessarily handle that?
Yeah. So the idea is to go with something that doesn't charge per token, but instead by request. So that's the GitHub Copilot is like that. The other thing as well is that this was kind of a ad hoc. It wasn't something, it wasn't the actual test or the actual QA process wasn't being done with this. This was to help write automated processes that those didn't use AI. So it was
Yeah.
with a robot framework for those who are familiar is the one. So you had a bunch of scripts that basically did all of the clicking, all of the testing, all of the QA stuff that I need to do. So it's kind of like using the AI to build the thing that you are going to also, as a human, go and verify, and then let that thing, that the deterministic thing that you trust, run multiple times. So that's kind of the idea. So it's not what we're using to test because yeah, I agreed then it would be very expensive. Yeah, the buy token definitely also you have to be kind of nifty about it and use it in certain cases. That could be something that could be done maybe if you want to verify your tests still are testing the right thing. That could be a test maybe you only run once a week or once every 2 weeks to maybe catch tests that you hadn't noticed are failing but for the wrong reasons.
That's fair, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Diana?
Sure. Thank you very much, Justine. It's been quite interesting. So you might have covered this before. I came a teeny bit late, but what does your day job look like now? And how does it differ? How has it, changed sort of at larger
Yeah,
scope?
absolutely. That's a good question. And I actually did not cover it. So I think it's a good, it's an excellent question because I definitely should have mentioned it first. So I'm the director of the AI team at GoLogic. So we do a lot of different things. Sometimes we'll focus kind of more on trainings. So that's definitely going to be kind of an easy win with customers. There's always need for training with AI. Otherwise, I'd say most of the time what we end up doing is either, so we have the a process that we call étude de faisabilité for everyone who wanted to hear French today. So it's a AI feasibility study would be the translation, where we go with a client, with a company, and we go find a bunch of different groups. So we'll have one meeting with the QAs, we'll have one meeting with the devs, one meeting with the ops, one meeting with the managers, and we just talk to them and ask them, what tools do you use? What's your bottleneck every day? What does your day look like? Do you have any big migrations that are coming up? That kind of stuff. And we just, find opportunities of where to add AI. The idea is to limit the risk when we do actually do those projects. Because say you wanted to plug your coding assistant to your documentation. Sure enough, looks good, right? Well, what if your documentation is just like so badly organized, such bad quality, you're going to get a classic garbage in, garbage out. So that's going to be the kind of things we want to catch before we start doing big projects. So that's one type of projects that we do, and those are really fun. I love asking those questions to people and getting to know their day to day. And th those those interviews are going to be the source of a lot of ideas of integrations that we did throughout the last year. And so that's going to be it. So yeah, another part is doing those integrations like we talked about. There might be also some building. So we might actually build from scratch some AI. We won't necessarily do some training. It'll be more about building what tools and integrations an AI would have. If there's like a setting that you might need, we did one recently for like creating reports automatically for QA that did video game testing. So that was a quite fun one. Um, and yeah, so a lot of different things. We'll also sometimes be in R&D groups where we go in for a couple hours and help their team maybe come up with different ideas and ways to integrate. So never a boring day. It's quite a fun time at the company, and the company I work at, GoLogic, is a DevOps originally. That's what they did. And so it's only recent in the last 2 years that they started really focusing on AI and seeing that it's just another tool like DevOps, right? It's integrated in everything we do. And there's a lot of opinions around it. There's a lot of hype around it. And so the idea is to kind of remove some of the fluff and get to the core.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I really appreciate it.
Early on, you talked about using it in your pipeline to reduce failing builds. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was at my old company.
And so I thought it was interesting that one of the paths that you had in there was just having it like it sounded like what you were saying was that one of the paths that you would follow was to have it autonomously troubleshoot and fix the build problems. Is that what you were saying?
No, that could be the next step for it. I mean, I welcome them to try it. That would be really fun to see. No, it was really just for an actual dev to go find kind of a root cause and add. A lot of the time it was config issues, it's going to be permissions issues, it's going to be path issues. Sometimes like truly things were missing. But in general, it was more about those kind of problems. Like I said, we have like this one solution, or they had this one solution to parse and build, and they need to be able to just accept any type of Gradle config, any type of Maven. So that's where the difficulty came in, and it was a really really complex problem, and I'm already just so impressed we were even able to get such high a number of successful builds originally. So this was just to go get the last final few that still had issues, basically, and prioritize the common causes, basically.
Oh, okay. So the value here was just like um just spotting those outliers, hey?
Yeah, exactly. So like for some reason Java 8 was missing, you would have different logs based on where the fail was happening, what type of build tool you were using. The idea is like for all of this to be clustered in one group as opposed to doing keyword matching where you might miss. You don't want to always have to rewrite your regex, basically.
I think I see Diana again.
Yeah.
Yes, I can often ask a lot of questions. So my next one, you said part of what your team does as consultants coming in to help a team with AI adoption is what my impression
Yeah.
is training. And
Mhm.
so are you training software engineers?
Yeah,
Sometimes.
mostly software engineers. We'll have some like fun little classes with people that do more like Terraform. Um, but yeah, it's mostly software engineers.
And then I'm wanting to know, you're probably aware that a lot of us in this community, at least the Calgary one, really enjoy doing ensemble or mob programming.
Mhm.
And so now I'm accidentally leading the question, but I'm curious, what techniques are you using to help new software engineer or not new, but software engineers new to you, software engineers come up to speed to be more effective with using AI and AI environments?
Yeah, we'll do exercises. We won't do all the mob and all that, but so it'll be more. We'll show the actual, background and where the buttons are and stuff, and then very quickly we'll be. Normally, we like to do them in person. Obviously, in the world that we are, a lot of it sometimes will be either hybrid or only on camera. But when we are in person, what we'll do is everyone has their laptop and everyone's doing an exercise. Either they're going to do it in groups, but smaller groups of two or three, or they're going to do it with by themselves. And so the idea is to go around as they're doing it. The reason why we do that is because we found that the groups that we have tend to be more skeptical or skeptics. So it's it's a harder group to get to do like more of the mob and more the big collaboration. That's why we can do a couple smaller groups, but even if you're unlucky and you have all the septics together, the group isn't going to be willing to try out the things as much. So it's a different setting. And so it can be the same. Like, obviously, you guys are here outside work hours, for at least for most, and you're here willing to learn. So there's going to be an extra motivation to work together as a group to get to the final result. But in those settings, it just it doesn't work as well, unfortunately. But maybe
I,
one day if we see a group of like people that are really, really, really down, we could try it out.
I think the word that you're looking for is skeptic.
Skeptic? What am I saying? Septic? Oh, that's like a
Septic.
Yeah.
septic. That's a
Yeah,
septic tank.
I think it's kind of
Sorry.
similar, but skeptic, it took me a bit to figure out.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for not laughing at me as soon as I said it and waiting for me to finish my point. I would have bursted out laughing.
We
That's when you
even
can see.
interpreted for you, so no problem.
That's when you can see my French background.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, yeah, this is a
Yeah, I'm skeptic. That's funny. I can't wait to tell my colleagues tomorrow. They will laugh at me so much.
I didn't even notice because I speak Portuguese, so I later when Rocky mentioned it that oh yeah, okay. I got a
There you go.
question
Yes,
about the
absolutely.
monitoring. How
Yeah.
how how to apply the MCP on the monitoring? Cause
Yeah. The monitoring one is probably the more hard one to integrate just because the sheer amount of incoming data isn't it's not an easy problem. So it's right now I've seen it more to create new dashboards or maybe to go see if your Prometheus names are matching more stuff like that than it is. Um, what you can do is have instead more of a determinist check where if you have an error in a certain part of the code, then you could send that to an LLM or a model. But there kind of has to have a little bit of a filtering. That's probably the one I would say that's the hardest to integrate.
I think I get it. Because in my previous work, I got a problem like I was watching the Grafana graphs and the Docker was about to explode. So I was thinking how the MCP could help me in things like that. But it's not an active monitoring. So I could ask like, could you help me to cover more tests here in the monitoring? Is
Yeah.
is it things like that I should use?
Yeah, you could ask questions also at what time did it start to spike, but it has to be very precise questions on one graph and not on the whole dashboard.
Okay.
The way the Grafana MCP is done, I can't remember if it's their official one or if it's a community built. But anyways, the way it's done, it just it's just here's all the data, and so you have to really call the right tool at the right spot.
It sounds like
Okay.
it's another instance where token count is very important. If it was cheap, then you could do all kinds of stuff, but without that,
Yeah.
when there's a dollar figure involved, you have to limit it.
Yeah, exactly. Hence why I put the little MCP wrapper around that one because it's kind of like the one I feel you have to more put guardrails and really tune it to how you want to use it.
Thank
That's a
you.
that's a really interesting problem. Like I figure like if you had alerts set up and the alerts were intelligent enough to like provide relevant context, then you could like maybe feed that context and get like really like useful answers. But at that point, maybe your alerts are good enough that you don't need the AI at all at that point.
Yeah, I think that's the goal, right? It's to have a limited amount of false positives and have a limited amount of false negatives. So you want to have good alerts that tell you when things are going badly and be very precise. And same thing, you don't want alerts that tell you things are going badly when it turns out they're going fine. Diana?
We've got a few people
Okay, we can do the others
who have
first.
things to
Yes,
say.
please.
Um,
Llewellyn?
MCPs.
Yeah.
So I have not been as happy with them as the promise of them has been. But I've been really, really happy with command lines. Have
Mhm.
you done things where you've added command lines instead of an MCP to interface with your software?
No, I haven't played with that as much. No. So you're seeing you like it better for what reasons?
I just, a lot of times the MCPs overwhelm the context really quickly and
Mhm.
then are not giving me what I need. But being able to hit through the command line seems to be really reliable and nice.
Mhm.
And so we've looked at just adding command line interfaces to our own apps to let it like interact with them nicely.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it stems from the problem of the creators of the MCP servers want the MCP to be used as much as possible, and they don't quite foresee what it would be used for. And so they're not very diligent about what the output is going to be. So we talked about, the whole output issue. Um, so that's why I tend to I like the MCP just because you can iterate and try things really quickly. But
Yeah,
then very quickly, I will either, make a wrapper around it or switch the description, that kind of stuff to really mold it to whatever I need and put those guardrails because I agree. Out of the Grafana one is probably, I think, the one that I was like, whoa, that really you're giving me all of this back? All right, that seems like a lot more than I asked for, but yeah, I think that might maybe fix the same issue, but we went two different ways. So that's interesting.
there's been like a discussion in general about how are you or choosing your tools such that like, or are you choosing tools that are easy for AI to work with?
Yeah, it's like SEO now, but for tools, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I got.
Well, it's awesome.
We've got one from the chat here. Paresh says, I'm an iOS developer and I want to know a bit more on how I can improve build cycle by utilizing AI system. Would you be able to suggest what could be a better tool or way where AI can best fit, like for code review, test case execution, architectural documentation, to help onboarding
Mhm.
as examples?
Yeah, I think it depends what your client is. There'd be more like what IDE are you using? What's your typical setup? Where's your documentation hosted? Those are going to be the typical first questions. I need to know the information. So if you're willing to share, we can, go through it together. Um, in general, I think one easy way, I'm again, I'm a little bit repeating myself and I apologize for that, but I like to go very small and iterate and add layers of complexity because it's the easiest way to make sure you're not building, a plane without wheels. That would be very dangerous. So let's start with little by little and then grow more and more. So for documentation, start with having markdowns. Start by having a repo that has a bunch of markdowns in that. And that's a excellent first step. Start by having custom instructions inside your repo. That, will be, you can have there's some open source projects that will have custom instructions that can be synced in between no matter what coding assistant you're using. But if you're using GitHub Copilot, then you can have custom instructions inside your repo that only affects your Copilot inside your repo. So if you know that you like to have your comments maybe in Portuguese, then you can put that in the custom instructions and it will add the comments in Portuguese. Same thing for, more actual, not that it's not useful to have your comments in Portuguese, but if there's something maybe you like to have your unit test be written a certain way, you don't want to have the word test in your class. Those kind of things, you can put those in the custom instructions. And that's an excellent first step already. I don't know if there was, oh, I can finally see the chat. Wow, the button stayed long enough.
Paresh says, pretty cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
Diana, you've been hanging on to your question for a little while. Did you want to?
Make sure everyone else gets a chance.
Can I please ask if the recording will be emailed to attendants?
We are going to put the recording on YouTube. And I think like the easiest way to get your hands on it would be on one of the either our Discord or, I mean, that's the easiest way that I can think of is on our Discord. We'll post it there. But is there somewhere that you would like to publish it, Justine?
I think YouTube is great. I might, yeah. I think it would
Yeah,
be.
yeah. So we're gonna put it on YouTube, and we're gonna have the link available. You can either look up the Calgary Software Crafters on YouTube, or you can join our Discord, and we will definitely post it there. I'm gonna repost. I'm gonna relink our um, our links here. So we've got our Discord link, which you can come and join our community and chat with us. Sorry, I'm kind of taking over here just a little bit for a moment. I'll
No worries at all.
and also if you'd like to donate to the Calgary Software Crafters, I'm also including our Buy Me a Coffee link right here to help us to host these events and to run our club. I'm going to post another link here, which is next Wednesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Is going to be our next speaker event in this series. It's Chelsea Troy, who's going to talk to us about what we can expect from LLMs as software engineers. So I do hope that y'all will come and join us again. But this is not me calling it into questions. This is just me doing a little interlude. Thank you very much for your patience.
Of course. So there was Diana's question about my typical setup. Before I get into that, I see some people might be logging off. I want to say a big thank you for all your questions for those who are leaving, and feel free to write to me on LinkedIn. I love chatting about this kind of stuff. And yeah, really, it was a great group. I see now the hype has been lived. That's not the right way of saying that. It lived up to the hype. There you go. Another French a French way of saying that. It lived up to the hype. Yeah, Jacqueline and Rocky talks about this group so highly, and it's been a joy. So, all right. So for the next question, Diana was asking me about my typical setup at work and or at home to write code in agentic AI tools. And then the example was, IDE, Windsurf, Agentic, Cascade, and then for the models, the various free ones. And I don't know if my answer is going to be satisfying or not because I really don't have a preference. I have to always try new things to be able to recommend them to the right people. So I rarely stay on the same model. I rarely stay on the same IDE, although I do mostly do VS Code, I will say. But I do sometimes have to dabble in other IDEs. Same thing for coding agents, Copilot, Cloud Code, Windsurf, C-Line. I'll really try to them all. They all have their strengths. They all have their weaknesses. It really depends on what kind of way you like to work. So yeah, pardon me for a bit of a boring way. But personally, I've really been liking Cloud Code, for little fun projects. And then what's the new one from Google? They have their new vibe coding tool, and it is called, gosh, it's escaping me.
Gemini,
No, it's not Gemini. It's
the command line one. I think it is.
no,
It's a Gemini.
no, that's not the one I'm
Gemini.
referring. Yeah, they have Gemini CLI, but I'm referring
Is it
to.
Opal?
No, it's, I want to say
Oh.
Playwright, but it's not. It is called, let me just go check. It's basically their answer to Lovable and Bolt. Let's see.
Thanks for the answer though. I think what I heard is that you're trying many different configurations, and
Mhm.
that's part of the
Exactly.
process.
It is. And you just have to see what works with you. And honestly, it changes very quickly.
Yes.
So it's hard to stay with one tool and say it's always going to be the best. From one moment to another, it might switch. I'm gonna go see the.
Someone said Google AI Studio.
Yes, that's the one. And then they have that's exactly it. And then within that, that's when they have Firebase. Oof. Firebase Studio. There you go. Thank you so much. We got there. Yeah. So Firebase, I've been, I'm not a UI developer, so it's definitely not my forte. Hopefully my slides were somewhat potable, but for use Firebase for a talk we're going to give at All In, which is a big AI conference in Montreal in September. So wanted to do maybe some little diagrams that were movable, some little fun fake websites to interact with to kind of demonstrate some points. And I used Firebase, and that I liked a lot more than Lovable and Bolt and all of those vibe coding tools. So that's maybe a new one that I didn't expect to like so much. And yes, thank you, Derek. That was exactly it. That got me to the answer. What are you all using these days? What do you hate? What do you love?
I put my two
So,
setups already in there.
Oh, awesome.
But Rocky,
so our team at work basically exclusively uses
Copilot.
whatchamacallit, Oh, this isn't going to be a very good story if I can't remember. WebStorm. We almost exclusively use WebStorm, and it's kind of key. Like we've got a bunch of tools that are integrated into WebStorm that is part of our, like, that are key to our process, right? So it's really hard to extract ourselves from that. But of course, they've even got like an agentic mode in beta right now. But I don't find that you can feed it context in a way that you can the others, right? Like a lot of those other tools. And so so managing and preloading the context with I don't know, like your own instructions and just having some like process files like Llewellyn talks about and that sort of thing just isn't a feature that I've found in the tool yet. So I'm really hoping that they keep on working on it and get better. Um, One thing that I am finding over time is just that their basic like inline hints appear to be absorbing more context from this, like from outside of the current file now than I'm used to, and I'm not sure what's powering that or where it's getting that data. But it I'm finding that the inline tooling is getting smarter, and it's not clear why.
That's frustrating because it's not like you can continue to help it help itself, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm still finding that at least in the workflow that I'm using, that like taking bite-sized chunks out of the work, like I already know what I want it to do. And so if I write the method signature, it can probably write the method as long as it's got the types that I'm looking for somewhere
Mhm.
nearby that it can find them. It usually does a pretty good job, unless it doesn't.
Just
We tried doing some stuff today with Claude as a backing model, both in Genie and in Windsurf,
Mhm.
and it was just stunning how poorly Genie performed with
Oh,
the
really?
same model as a backer.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
may I ask one question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just for like troubleshooting. Let's say if I run a Python script, it give me an error message. Usually this message will be short and sweet. I can put, ChatGPT, it will give me some suggestion.
Mhm.
But for server side, let's say if the server is based on Java, even we have the log, the server log, I remember when I use data virtualization like Denodo, and for another case is a Java application with like a small CDR. They're both like Java based, but the
Mhm.
size of the log is huge. in in this case, just from your talk, if basically I cannot upload this into the ChatGPT, whatever, the huge, like sometimes over hundreds megabyte, right? I mean, it will consume a lot of token. I just wonder in this case how to dealing with this kind of huge log file. It's really, I can see a lot of word message, different error message. I don't know in reality how you handle this situation. Even the server itself seems it's still running fine. Thank you.
That's a really good question, and it's definitely a challenge. Even the example I had about the build logs and how we were clustering them, the first step was to extract the relevant snippet, and we did that using a simple regex. So that might be a way of a solution. I don't know how predictable your logs are on the server side, but that might be one way. I'm a big fan of mixing deterministic and non-deterministic, and that's kind of a way to be able to be very precise with what we're asking the AI to do. So I don't know if that would help.
I mean, I can open this log file, but I mean, I can see, okay, here you have like this error message, another error message, right? For even write a script, I don't know like which area to focus. I mean, it's kind of it's seeking automated script tool, right, to
Yeah.
help to alleviate. Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
can have AI write the script that takes your log files and parses them into usable chunks, and then have AI read those chunks.
Yeah, but
You don't have
I
to write the script yourself.
yeah, I did give AI some input, right? I mean, yeah, because of that error message is inside log file. The size of log file is
Yeah,
quite
so
huge.
have AI write a script that chunks out your log file into usable pieces, and then take those usable pieces and give them to you AI.
But I mean, the size of log file is huge, right? I mean,
Yes, that's why you chunk it into smaller pieces.
but
But
how
I think
which piece I did chunk out because it's
we
I can if I read it manually, it will take hours. You know.
I think Llewellyn, he's saying that even the first AI, the log is too big. So even the first time, I guess you could, just take a snippet, but it seems to be too long of a log.
You can
So,
just chunk it randomly into
oh, yeah,
bite-sized pieces and have AI look at it and say, how do I find useful information? Write me the
that
script to
one.
grab that.
Mhm. That's doable. I mean, if it's still an hour, it's pretty long. So it's a hard one. Maybe there's a way to have your logs be a little bit less verbose. If your stack traces are really deep, maybe to have cut them a little bit. That might be a way to reduce some lines. But yeah, otherwise I think the only way then is to, if it's too big, it means you gotta chop it.
Yeah, for example, if there is let's say if we write something in um, uh, NLP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you can, I mean, in certain way to classify, like you mentioned in your talk, what kind of common error will be there,
Yeah.
So yeah,
If you're having context issues, and especially more in the sense of speed, that you're, even if you chunk it, it's still going to be too long. The having the classifier, it's going to be a bit faster if you use a smaller model, but it's still going to be pretty a sizable job, and the training of it is going to be not awesome. Um, but I think otherwise, maybe also taking a time period of your logs. Again, I really don't know how they're organized, so I'm just taking a shot in the dark here. But if there's a time period that you want to look, instead of taking the whole logs from the last hour, maybe trying to find, using some other metric, what exact time the logs were important.
yeah,
Or
okay, thank you. Yeah. For another question, especially here, just for migration. Uh, I mean, especially for the planning stage, if I have a Luxy like a BI system, data warehouse in the system on the premise, that with over like older technical stack. For example, I can say, okay, if I ETL job is written in data stage or informatic,
Mhm.
that data warehouse is hosting in Natiza. I want to migrate to DBT with a backend Snowflake. I mean, how actually this AI will help. I mean, also I would like to planning, also a little bit higher level planning, and also a kind of migration steps. How this could help. I'm just
Yeah. You there'll be some, when I do a migration, and hopefully this is applicable for the type of migration you're talking about too. I like to split it in different steps. The first step is getting an understanding or extracting information about how things are right now. So that can be extracted in a markdown, as simple as that, or you can have a little bit more of a complex way of storing that information. Once you have that information, you want to do the same thing again, get the information on how the next system is going to be. So if you're integrating in something that already exists, you go look at how that looks. And then on the third step, you have an AI generate a plan of based on the first thing and the second thing, how are you gonna go? So like that, it doesn't have to go look through a bunch of different data tables or code or however, whatever you're trying to migrate. It can just look at the summary it had. And then once it has that step by step, you can have it say, okay, well, go ahead, go do step one and verify with me that things work in between each step. That's one way of doing it. That's how we do a lot of migration from one language to another or one framework to another. It works pretty well. One caveat is that you might have to restart this whole migration process like 5, 6, 10 times. That's okay because each time you're going to refine your prompts and refine, oh, wait, when I told you to look at this system, I forgot to tell you that there's also this repo that you should look at, or this system actually is deprecated. You know, you can add whatever information. Now I'm just giving examples. But all that to say is that like a really end-to-end migration might take multiple tries with the same AI, but at the end you'll get something really, really close to the end result. Obviously, this is more for like migrating one feature from PHP to Java from one repo to another. This is like the kind of use case more that I am used to than migrating from one database to another. I think there would be some complexities I wouldn't foresee until I actually try it.
What I mean is, we want to migrate a platform, right, just from older system. So you just mentioned you will use prompt, prompt, right, to get what we kind of we have currently, right? Because usually the current system, older system, we do have a system is running. We have there's a design document, also have like support document and this kind of documents, right? So basically, it's how to quickly know the current system. So this is like which tool could be help. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
my question. Yeah.
I'm not too sure. I'm sorry. I would need I think a little bit more context and then probably some time with some pen and paper and some research. But feel free to write to me on LinkedIn and maybe I can give it a look. I think that's the most I can do for now.
Okay, thank you.
With the log question earlier, that sort of reminds me a little bit of like the last talk that you did there, Llewellyn, where where as long as things are going well, then the logs are extremely brief, um, and you only export like a more verbose version for the AI to read if there's relevant data that you need from it.
Yeah. But I think what they're doing there is splunking through a lot of logs to try to figure out what the system is doing. Yeah. Where there, you said a classifier, but a lot of times I'll just use AI to like be like, read this and write me a markdown about it, which is classification, but not a classifier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you wouldn't want to train a classifier on this anyways. We're way past training models, at least
Yeah.
us common folks. All right. Well, I think on this we should end. Thank you everyone for having me. I love the question and discussion at the end. It's great to hear what you're all working on. And again, feel free to write to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to chat some more about this. If not, I'll see you in other software crafters group for sure.
Thanks very much for
You
doing
can-
this,
Of course.
Justine. That was amazing. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone else here. I hope we'll see you again in the coming weeks. Yeah, have an excellent night.
All right. Bye everyone. Thank you for organizing, Rocky and Jacqueline. See ya.